Good evening, friends. Welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon. I'm a retired New York City police detective with 20 plus years of law enforcement. And if you like all things true crime related from a police perspective, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you will get all things DutyRon when I go live or when I upload another video. Tonight, we are going to talk about the outline of the autopsy for Gabby Petito, a 22-year-old woman, young girl, who left Long Island on July 2nd to go on a cross-country trip with her fiance, Brian Laundrie, and never returned home. I have tonight two distinguished guests. One you will recognize just from two shows ago, Edward Wallace, Crime Scene Unit, NYPD Retired Detective. He was with us just the other night. You guys all know and love Ed. And I also have Barbara Butcher, the chief of staff for the New York City Medical Examiner's Office. She's retired, and she is here to give us her professional, legal, medical, professional opinion on what could possibly be going on here with Gabby Petito and the report, the autopsy report. So we are going to have wonderful guests for us to give question and answer at the end. So if you hang around to the end, you'll be able to answer, you'll be able to ask questions of my guests. But this is going to be a pinpointed to the autopsy only. I know there's been a lot of things that went on today. There was a federal arrest warrant issued for Brian Laundrie. That is, again, that's just the start of the wheels of justice. There's the search that's continuing on, and there's a whole bunch of things, but we are not going to go down those rabbit holes tonight because the guests that I have are going to answer our questions and talk about the ins and outs of the autopsy, what needs to be done, why it takes so long, what they do, and Ed is going to answer a lot of the questions about evidence collection and what gets taken from the scene, what doesn't get taken from the scene. Why did the investigators from the federal authorities go back on day two? Why did the medical examiner's office go back and do a recheck of the location? We'll have all that. We'll get to ask Barbara that and Ed when we come back on. But right now, I just want to show you a piece of small media. It's just a small piece of media. I like to do this so you guys can get a good idea of what we're going to be talking about. And again, this is older footage, so don't, this is from a couple days ago, but I just want to give you, and I want to set up what we're going to be doing here. So let me get this going for you. Of course, DutyRon challenged in the Department of Tech, but I always get it. All right, here we go, guys.
Breaking news tonight, the FBI says the human remains found in Wyoming Sunday are missing 22-year-old Gabby Petito, the coroner saying that her manner of death was a homicide. Meanwhile, the search back on today for her fiance, Brian Laundrie, considered a person of interest in this case. Let's get out to NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who is in Venice, Florida. Vaughn, those autopsy results just coming in. What can you tell us?
Yeah, just here in the last 12 minutes is when this autopsy report here from Teton County Coroner was just released by the FBI, and it was determined by the coroner that the initial determination for the manner of death is homicide. The cause of death remains pending final autopsy results. But here's the other part that is, I think, important to note, and that is from Special Agent in Charge Michael Schneider, who says this is particularly as it remains to Brian Laundrie, the fiance in this case, says that Mr. Brian Laundrie has been named a person of interest. Anyone with information concerning Mr. Laundrie's role in this matter or his current whereabouts should contact the FBI. Again, the initial determination for the manner of death is homicide. This is out of Wyoming. Here in just these last 20 minutes, Allison, we are here at a location where authorities are currently searching and hoping to find Brian Laundrie. This is where his family reported that he went on a hike 1 week ago today after returning from Wyoming. But the issue was the family didn't report him missing until 4 days later on Friday. And essentially, the big question mark is what happened to him over those course of those 4 days. And now in the week since, his family said he went missing here from Florida. But even more concerning, right, is the fact that that is coming from just the family, Allison, reporting that he went missing on Tuesday. It may have been longer for as far as authorities right now are aware. It was 3 weeks ago, the family said, that he returned here, September 1st. Today,
all right, I'm going to pause it here just for a moment because this is part of what I'm going to be talking to Barbara about. This is the actual recovery of Gabby Petito's body. This is the overview, and I'm going to back it up when we get to talking with her, and we're going to look at this location and talk about it.
September 21st. There is, again, a 3-week period that Brian Laundrie was been here in Florida. The question, though, is where is he now? As far as we are aware, his parents are still at their home about 20 minutes from this preserved location. Allison?
Vaughn, a question for you about this search, too. It was going on for a few days, and they called it off yesterday. They said they had exhausted all their options. I mean, this is a 25,000-acre wildlife refuge, so it's hard to believe that they had gone through everything. But now the search is back on today. Do we have any understanding of what may have triggered them, why they said, hey, we have to go back in there today?
We don't, and authorities have not provided information as to what led them to do so. Almost 24 hours passed in which this area was no longer being searched. And around sunrise this morning, authorities headed back in. They've had ATVs, they've had other high-powered vehicles, because a lot of this is essentially swampland here. We're talking about 40 square miles of preserve here. And again, this is there's a lot of hiking routes, biking routes here. A good amount of that, though, is underwater. And so far here this afternoon, police here in
had separate press conference scheduled today. Both of them canceled. Do we have any sense of what was going on? Were they waiting potentially for the autopsy results? It seems like we're getting a lot of mixed messages about who's going to talk, what's happening, what's going on here.
Right. The Petito family, Gabby's family, they have said that they would be waiting for the autopsy report, for this coroner report to come out. Of course, here in the last 20 minutes, that's now what we have here. They have essentially gone silent over the last couple of days. They're saying in a statement that they needed time to grieve after it was reported that the body believed to be Gabby had been found in Wyoming. As for the Laundrie family, Brian Laundrie, the 23-year-old's family.
All right, I'm going to stop it there, guys. I think that was enough. I just wanted to set up basically what we're going to be speaking about. So now joining us, without further ado, joining us from her home, Chief of Staff. She's retired from the New York City Medical Examiner's Office. You guys all know and love her. This is Barbara Butcher. Thank you so much, Barbara, for taking out the time out of your busy schedule. Everybody knows that you have a wealth of information for the viewing audience, and I appreciate you coming in here.
Thank you, Ron. Always a pleasure.
We also have a good friend of yours and a colleague that worked with you. He is no stranger to the show because just 2 nights ago, he was live with us. Ed Wallace, thank you so much for coming back into Crime Time with DutyRon. Barbara and Ed did work together professionally on many different occasions. You just got to unmute your mic, Ed. I still see the thing. I'm always helping you out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. And you are a fan favorite. The ladies love you. They say you look like Mr. Costner. You know, I can't bring another fellow retired detective on here without the ladies jumping on him. Between you and Joe Murray and all the guys, I don't know what to do. We got to get a security detail.
Well, they're also having fun with me too. They say I went from kindergarten cop to first grade cop.
Yes, that's because I called you a first grade. I left that out tonight. I left it out when I did the intro. Barbara, I just want to start with you. Can you there's a lot of new listeners. I got a lot of new viewers. Would you just give some of the folks a background on your, on what your knowledge is in regards to autopsies and whatnot?
Sure. I started out at the New York City Medical Examiner's Office as a death investigator, medical legal death investigator, they're called here. And I've been in the business for 25 years. I retired out as the chief of staff after getting a couple of promotions in there.
Yeah.
And I still do consulting for private cases.
Excellent. So you haven't just retired. You continue on with your consulting.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm going to get Ed on to just give a little bit of your background, Ed, because the last time I did the intro, and I didn't do it right. So Ed, just give the listening audience a little bit about your background in a brief overview.
Well, I spent the majority of my career in the NYPD Crime Scene Unit, where I was a certified senior crime scene analyst. And I worked with Barbara as a medical legal death investigator on many crime scenes together. After 15 years and 2,000, close to 2,700 crime scenes investigated and given testimony in close to 400 trials as a forensic expert, I moved on to counterterrorism in the last year of my career on the NYPD. Retired out of there in 2004. And then I went to work with my own private forensic consulting company. And I have contracts with the State Department, the Defense Department, and I travel all around the world doing counterterrorism forensic work. I also teach for Louisiana State University, so go Tigers. I teach a forensics course and I teach emergency responders around the nation how to collect forensic evidence of chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, or explosive materials. And then I went to work with Barbara at the medical examiner's office in New York City in 2008 to run a forensics training course where we had obtained grants from the Department of Justice to train our nation's death investigators on how to do basic death investigations, advanced death investigations, and bloodstain pattern analysis.
Wow. I would hate to see the long version of that. You really get around. You got a great resume. You've done a lot of great stuff, and you know this is right up the alley of this Gabby Petito case. And Barbara, I want to jump in right away with you. I had your numbers of all the different investigations that you have. I think you corrected me. The last time I said it was 5,500, and you were like, I would have had to have 5 careers to do the 5,500.
No, it was 5,500 cases, 600 homicides.
Right, but I said 5,500 homicides, and I got it right. So she's investigated 5,500 death scenes. Okay, that means she's been out at the locations of over 5,500 death scenes in the New York City, in the 5 boroughs. She's also investigated 680 homicides. She was there investigating Flight 587. That was 265 deaths, and the DNA recovery at the World Trade Center. So she's instrumental in a lot of things, and Barbara was she left out some very important things that I had to highlight for you guys. Barbara, everybody wants to know, Gabby Petito, 22 years old. She was out potentially for over 20 days in Wyoming in the Teton National Park. Just could you give some of the viewing audience what kind of challenges you have as a medical examiner / all the folks who are involved in that recovery? What are some of the things that they're up against there? And I'll show some pictures as you speak.
Okay. She was Gabby was found in the Moran Vista camp area, which is what they call a dispersed campground. In other words, it has no facilities. It's not a place where you just pitch a tent and get water, showers, or electricity. This is very, very remote area, very wild area. Now, after 21 days, we all understand the nature of decomposition. And in addition, being a wild area, there are bobcats, cougars, all kinds of vermin. And, you have to be realistic about what kind of remains you'll be looking for. And the big challenge is to not just find those remains, but to find all the remains. You mentioned that the medical examiner's office had gone back a second time to the site, and that's most likely because they may have found that they were missing a bone or some such, and went back to see if they could find everything. That's just the realistic likely scenario here. I don't know exactly what her remains looked like, but after 21 days in the wilderness,
yeah, It's you know, a lot of people were talking about it in chat rooms that I was monitoring and things that I was seeing. You know, we spoke about how the lead FBI, the lead agent in charge, before the body was removed and brought to the coroner, he gave his condolences to the Petito family, to the Schmidt family. I was a little taken back by that, but once I thought about it for a few moments, I said, you know, there could be many variables that came into play there. Have you ever seen that go on in your time where condolences are given to a family? And if so, what are some of the identifying marks that could be on a human body, as such as a 22-year-old girl who has been out there in the elements for a good 20, 25 days? What could they have seen to give them that positive idea?
You know, you're right, Ron. It's not really correct to give condolences to a family until a positive, and I mean positive, identification is made. And a positive identification is not just viewing the body, because people can make mistakes, but DNA, fingerprints, or forensic odontology, but they compare dental records to the teeth that remain. That's a really good way to identify people because it's so unique, what work you may have had done. But of course, you have to know who you're looking at in order to get their dental records, or who you're looking for. So it is very unusual for the agent to have given condolences to a family without confirming an ID. Now, could they have the exact clothing that she was reported to be wearing? And could it be that it was ID in her pocket? Maybe her hair was, you know, rather
Right.
distinctive. Yeah.
Right. Or I get what you're saying. Right. These are some of the things that we've all gone through in our heads. And now most of the folks, you know, can come to that, you know, realization that there could be some identifying marks. But we talked about, and many people had conversations about the tattoos. What's the odds of tattoos still being visible in a decedent 20 some odd days out in the elements like that?
Well, you know, you can have the skin tends to slough off in decomposition. So the top layers of skin would likely be gone. It is possible in flesh, in muscle, or in fat cells to see the ink of a tattoo. Sometimes you have to use an alternate light source, which Ed can tell you all about, you know, to light up the various pigments in a tattoo. But again, we're talking about, you know, possible animal activity here. We don't really know what, you know, and I want to be sensitive to people about this. But.
Right. And I appreciate that because, you know, you never know family or friends and folks that are listening. And I should have put the kind of disclaimer out there, but I did it in advance before the show started. But if anybody suffers from PTSD or sensitive to any of these types of conversation, this might not be the stream for you. And I did put that disclaimer in there earlier. But again, for, you know, the folks on the ground that made this recovery, I was a little taken back by the quick condolences sent out to the family. But I did think that the FBI would have probably had something that they were definitive about. But like you said, Barbara, you know, a removal and brought back to, you know, the medical examiner's office through the various methods that we'll get into in a few minutes. Ed, you spoke about on our last getting together on the last stream, you talked about, you know, recreating the crime scene and going through from the vehicle on the road to the 250 yards, which is a substantial distance, going 250 yards from the van to the place where she was recovered. What type of, because a lot of people have asked me the questions afterwards, what type of recreation would you do as a crime scene investigator from like a potential route? And how would they even determine what the potential route is? Could you talk just a little bit about that?
Well, it wouldn't be a recreation per se. You would do is you would start off at where we know the van was,
Mhm.
okay, and then you could do a series of searches, line searches with. You would require a lot of police officers or forensic experts, anthropologists, or whatever the case may be, a coordinated effort to search from that vehicle the paths that would lead to where the body was found. And then along that path, you would be searching, as I said the last time, for footwear impressions, drag marks, possible blood trails if blood was let. You would also be looking for what we call sign, such as maybe a piece of the victim's or the suspect's clothing got snagged on some of the plant life in that area there, and fibers were torn off and left behind. And again, there's a thing we call it Lacard's exchange principle. So what it says is anytime two objects come in contact and then separate, they're going to transfer bits and pieces of each other to each other and of the scene, that their presence were at the scene. And so when they leave, they bring the scene with them and they leave their presence at the scene. So you would look along those lines. You would see, look for broken branches, twigs. You would look for pieces of material, fibers, maybe discarded jewelry or things from the hair or and things of that nature. And you would try to establish how they got from the van to where they deposited the body. Was he carrying the body? Was he dragging the body?
Right. Do we look for drag marks, like a drag, like like a foot that would drag on the floor or on the dirt? Would you be looking for things like that?
I could have done that. Could have used a blanket and dragged the victim in a blanket along the ground if he wasn't strong enough to carry her, or he could have wrapped her in the blanket and had her over her shoulder. There's any number of ways that he could have transferred, or she could have walked there on her own, as you said earlier. And this is where she was murdered. So there's any number of things, but again, the only way you're going to know, even with the 21-day lapse, is you have to go out there and you have to look for these things.
Right. And Barbara, I wanted to go to you quickly. We saw in the I don't have it in this video, but this is the actual crime scene here. So this is shot from either a helicopter or a drone. I believe it was a helicopter. They have a tent set up off to the right there, and I would imagine that's for the personnel to be out of the elements. And it looks like where all the investigators are, right under this yellow tree, is where the recovery was made. Photographs, looking at the body, things of that nature. Is there anything that your office would be collecting from that scene, or would it just be photographs, looking at the location? I'm just asking this because some people just don't know the answer.
Sure. The medical examiner works very closely with the crime scene investigators, with the police and sheriffs. So I wouldn't want to do anything that would compromise their recording of evidence in place, in situ, as they say.
Right.
So the crime scene investigators, the CSU, they don't mess with the body, and I don't mess with, the surrounding evidence. So we work together to make sure that, for instance, Ed would be picking up shell casings, and I would be handling the body in such a way that a bullet would not pop out. A lot of times you get the bullet close to the skin. So together, he's got the casing, I've got the bullet. That's great evidence, right?
Right.
So the medical examiner would be gathering all the human remains after carefully documenting in photographs and in sketches where each of those pieces lay. And again, we're assuming here that there may have been some animal activity with perhaps scattering. So I would be gathering that material, but again, recording it as Ed and his team would be gathering surrounding evidence and documenting things like footprints and drag marks.
Right. And as we saw in this footage, and the reason I keep going back to it is because not only are they concentrated right here in this area, but they walk off to the left of our screen. If you're looking at your screen to the left, and that would, for me, give the indication of perhaps there was some scatter, that they had two separate locations where they were looking at remains. But we won't know that. I don't think, they would, maybe they wouldn't put that out, for investigatory reasons. But it just, some people ask me, why are they walking away? See how they're walking towards that other location? And that could be an indicator, of course, of activity with wildlife. Why does it take so long to get the tox and the all of the extra things that they look to do? And some of the folks here that are in the chat, they have no clue, and most people who don't know anything about this business have no clue of what exactly they're looking for. Would you be able to just give an overview of some of the tests that would be done, or some of the things, and why it would take so long?
Sure. Again, it's a little surprising that they released a manner of death without a cause of death. So the immediate implication is, well, we don't know the cause of death yet until we finalize all our tests, our toxicology tests, our tissue tests, closer examination perhaps of the hyoid bone, of a fracture. So you don't generally release a manner of death until you release a cause, right? So here I'm forced to wonder if they do know the cause of death, but because of the situation with this person of interest suspect, Laundrie, they don't want to yet release that information because it's very unusual. Ed, have you seen that yet, where they've released the manner and not a cause?
No, and I thought the same thing, Barbara, the same thing as you. I mean, if there's obvious gunshots or blunt force trauma injuries, you would think that would be a no-brainer to be able to give out that information. So I'm a little leery about why they would just say homicide without giving the rest of the details.
Yeah. Well, I know I did a little research and I reached out to some of my colleagues in Wyoming and the surrounding areas. The coroner there, Dr. Brent Blue, is he's not a pathologist. He's an elected coroner, a family practice doctor who's new to the job. So there may be some, there's a learning curve on the terminology and what's done and what isn't done. But I understand that initially it was reported that he did the autopsy. In Wyoming, you don't have to have a forensic pathologist do it. It could be a coroner.
So a family doctor perhaps did the autopsy on his own without anybody there to assist, or watch?
We don't really know right yet. He said to the press, "I did a preliminary autopsy."
Wow.
And so, but then I just heard this evening, maybe half an hour ago, from a colleague that a Dr. Thomas Brennan, who is a pathologist, may have been called in from Sheridan, Wyoming. In which case, then he would have that expertise there.
And what was the doctor's name there? The coroner from Wyoming?
It's Dr. Brent Blue. He's got about 30 years as a family practice physician. And, in Wyoming, it's a coroner system. And the only requirement to be coroner there is that within 1 year of appointment or election, you take a basic course in death investigation. Some night when we have time, we'll go into the incredibly mixed up system in the United States where you either get a forensic pathologist, medical examiner, or an elected coroner who may have no training at all.
Wow.
That's another subject for another day.
And just to touch, because this is mind-blowing, and you did touch on it briefly with me in the last live we did with Christine Engelhardt. You had mentioned that some of the folks who do this or that get elected to that position are like EMTs or paramedics. Could that possibly be?
Oh, sure. Or more frequently, undertakers,
Oh my God. Yeah. Funeral directors. Yeah.
funeral directors. Yeah.
And,
Well,
and it makes sense when you hear families request a second opinion, like a Dr. Baden, right? Am I saying his name right? Baden, the older doctor.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so this to me is just mind blowing. I mean, I see my chat is going crazy. There's over 7,300 folks in the chat, and there's just, hey guys, by a show of hand in the chat, who's surprised to hear this? Barbara and I will pinpoint and do a dedicated live stream to talking about this across America. That is a great show idea, and I'm glad you brought it up live here with Crime Time with DutyRon. So I'm looking forward to doing that and having more of a conversation about it. Getting back to some of the testing and some of the things that they do in a case like this, and it could be right across the board. Would they be? And you know, again, I'm not trying to be I'm trying to be sensitive, but I need to ask the question because so many people asked it to me privately, and I didn't have the answer. Do they do a like a rape kit on her to see if she was sexually assaulted during this autopsy?
That I don't know.
And I didn't know how to answer that question. So
Yeah. I mean, I certainly would. I would certainly go all out. I would have our best forensic pathologist on the job. With the coroner observing, and of course, and
right.
the law enforcement personnel. So I think Mimi asked about who's present at the autopsy, who has to be there, and that would be the lead detective, any investigating officers, FBI, and of course the medical examiner. In this case, a coroner, and hopefully that forensic pathologist from Sheridan, Wyoming, would be there.
Brenner.
To that.
Yeah.
So,
You know, again, if the lead detective is there, he's there for the reason of just actually visually seeing it, but also to ask you, hey, we had this happen or something developed since we brought the decedent in. We would like you to check for this. So, right, isn't that kind of like the dialogue that could go back and forth between?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lead detective could be at the autopsy and get a call on his phone. Oh, we just found that the main suspect is a right-handed, et cetera, and now you're looking at left side injuries consistent with right side punch.
Right.
So things like that. Sure. The
so,
communication.
So our time's limited. I know I promised you 30 minutes because Barbara has a busy schedule tomorrow. I'm going to take a few minutes to take some questions from the chat, if that's okay with you, Barbara. But before I go to the chat, is there a checklist that goes in an autopsy? Is there, checking for DNA under fingernails? Is that some of the things that the medical examiner does, or is that what the crime scene unit guys do? I know the answer to this question, but I'm asking you for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah, the medical examiner would collect any evidence from the body itself, and then and work closely with crime scene unit. That's the best way to do it, obviously. Like you mentioned, rape kit. Yes, it's always a good idea. There's no. We have no direct knowledge of anything that happened to this poor girl before her death.
So you want to eliminate anything, and I wanted to answer yes to that, but since I didn't actually know 100%, I just said I would wait. I would just wait to talk with you and get that answer. So
yeah, some might say, oh well, why bother doing a rape kit since this was her boyfriend, and therefore that she would already have.
Right.
His biologic material, but that's not why you do it. Suppose
Yeah.
that a defense attorney said, well, my God, who's to say that this poor girl didn't wander off and get raped and brutalized by someone else entirely?
Right.
If you don't have the rape kit, you cannot disprove that theory.
So this is all part of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, so to speak, right? They want to, leave no stone unturned here.
Sure. There's a protocol you follow for an autopsy. It's not a checklist, but it's a protocol of good practices.
Carrie Johnson asks in a super chat, would the family of Gabby have to view her body and identify her? I hope they didn't have to.
No. And that would not be, I mean, in this particular case, if what we're talking about is true, of scattered remains or et cetera, she would be identified by DNA, fingerprints, or I think is likely in this case, forensic odontology. All you need is her dental records, and then a dentist would do comparisons.
It was said that when the Federal Bureau of Investigation did a search warrant shortly after, I think the day after her body was recovered, they went to Northport down in Florida. They did a search warrant. I would think that hairbrushes, toothbrushes, and things of that nature, her personal effects, if there was any there, were also brought into custody. And if they didn't get anything from that home in Northport, they would go to Blue Point, Long Island, right here, and go to her parents and get her toothbrush or hairbrush. And that would be used also to positively identify her. Let's look at the private chat, because these are some of my private folks. Joey Brooklyn asks, question for Barbara. In a case like this, are there additional coroners viewing the autopsy? We already covered this, but he spins something at the end that I want to ask you. And if they are together, do they share and ask questions and give their medical opinions? Is there I think what Joey Brooklyn is asking is, do they have a conversation like, hey, I think maybe this might have happened, or is it they just let whoever's leading it take the lead?
Yeah, no, there wouldn't be additional coroners there. I think in this case, since the coroner, Dr. Blue, the family practitioner, it's his decision. And if he did indeed bring in a forensic pathologist, then yes, the two of them would discuss findings, possibilities, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, it's a scientific protocol that is more about documenting and finding than discussing.
Right.
Forensic pathologists don't like to have, theories and things. They like to have hard scientific evidence.
Makes sense. Joe Murray's girlfriend, Angie, sends in a question. If Wyoming did the initial autopsy, will the medical examiner here in New York start all over? ? And if they determine the cause of death, do they stop there, or do they do a thorough autopsy with toxology, etc.? Thank you, Angie. Barbara, I'll let you take that.
Sure. No, the New York City medical examiner has no jurisdiction here whatsoever. The autopsy is done by Wyoming. It's, their case. So unless the family asked for a private New York pathologist to give their opinion, no, we wouldn't be doing it. And no good pathologist would ever just say, oh, I've got the cause of death, I'll stop here.
Right.
That would be a sin, because you never know what you're going to find next. There's no such thing as a partial autopsy or as a preliminary autopsy. You either do it or you don't, and you do your autopsy.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that, Barbara.
Sure. And thank you, Angie. Good to hear from you. Yeah,
she's great. Another quick question too is, and these are coming rapid fire at you. At the scene, a lot of people are unclear of exactly what goes on, and it's more of preservation to get the decedent back to the coroner's office to do the complete exam. How much work gets done in the field is what this person is asking. How much gets done at the scene? What we're looking at here. Let me add it to the scene. What type of hours wise, time wise, because people are like confused about going back and why the medical examiner came back to that location after the fact. Maybe some of your theories on that.
Sure. You know, I would do as little at the scene as possible. Um, my job was always to gather the remains and preserve the remains in their original state and document them, get them back so that the pathologist can do a good autopsy. And I'm sure Ed can speak to that. I think the only reason that the ME did go back, again, this is purely theory, but in a state like this, you would have some scattering of remains, would be likely. So therefore, they may have realized, you know, you have 200 and something bones. Maybe they were missing a piece of rib or something like that. And again, just theory based on where she was found. But I think Ed can speak to that too.
Yeah. And I think, Ed, we did see and talk about when these investigators are walking off. It's just a brief thing here, but they're actually walking off from the location. And, you know, people want to know, there's questions that are being asked in the chat, but we don't have the answers to those questions. We don't know what her remains look like, nor will we probably ever know what they look like on the scene. You know, at this point, it's about bringing justice for the family, and we've already brought closure for them by her recovery, but bringing justice is the next part. The wheels of justice have to spin, and the medical examiners, the detectives, the investigators, boots on the ground doing this investigation, you know, they're the ones that it's in their hands. And finding a perpetrator is what's the next step. And as we know, and as we see what's going on every day, it's challenging because he's having a lot of help from a lot of people from the outside, and his family they're not helping the situation either. Joe Murray sends in a super chat, so he paid for this question, Barbara. Barbara, do you have any objection speaking with defense counsel about your findings and autopsy report?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we did not work for the prosecutor. We didn't work for the defense. We worked for science and truth and the family. So we only have one objective, and that is to report the truth and the scientific findings as we saw them without prejudice. So of course, I always spoke to defense counsel, to prosecutors, whoever wanted me to.
If I may jump in at this time.
Sure, Ed.
Because forensics takes no sides. We're not biased. And in fact, Barbara and I, we trained defense attorneys in New York City. So they understand the science, okay? We don't take sides. We just examine, follow the science where it takes us, and we let the chips fall where they may fall.
Right. Yeah.
That's right, Ed. We did that course for defense attorneys, remember?
That's right.
That was interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great to have regular folks who don't see this kind of stuff and don't have any inkling about what goes on behind the scenes. And that's why I love to do this perspective, because it gives people an inside look into forensics 101 and what happens with a team effort from the law enforcement side to the medical examiner side. And it's a huge partnership that is very instrumental in bringing justice and getting the proper evidence and presenting it in a court of law. So this is huge. I'm looking for a couple of more questions. Joey, hey, there he is, Egg Drop Joey. This is a good friend of ours from years and years ago. Thank you, Ron, for covering this story. Hey, thank you, Joe, for being here, and thank you for the support. I'm gonna let Barbara go because I'm gonna look for one more good question for her. I saw one. I'm just scrolling back. Barbara, did anything jump out at you? I know you want to go.
No, I'm fine, Ron. I get all, once I get charged up, I'm not tired anymore.
Right. Okay, here's a good one, but I didn't find the actual one. Laura Lane says, DutyRon, how can they tell if the body and or broken bones were the cause of an animal or a cause of an injury by a person? That's a good question.
That's a great question. And the answer is anthropology. A good experienced forensic pathologist can tell you about the bite marks of animals, the tooth marks on bone. And a forensic anthropologist will be able to tell you everything about teeth marks, animal activity, tool marks, like a cut of bone, what it was made by, a serrated blade, a machete, a chainsaw, etc. So yeah, that's a great question and a good. That's why I say it's got to be a forensic pathologist doing the autopsy, because they know how to look for those things. They're trained to look for that.
Not a family physician, that's for sure. And I'm not putting him down. I'm not putting down the skills. We're just saying this is somebody who specializes in that area.
No,
Yeah.
I hear he's a good guy, and and he's a good coroner, and we're just saying though that we want to bring every single expertise, every specialist we can to help this family and this poor girl.
This will be for Barbara or Ed. How long does it take to get a full, like, how long will it take in this case for them to give a cause, the cause of death, and perhaps their complete findings, if she wasn't poisoned, or how, what was her cause of death? Could this take 6 or 8 weeks? Could this take a month? Could this take 10 days? Who wants to take it? I think Barbara will take that one.
It's what Ed and I were discussing before. If they know it's a homicide, then they know probably a cause of death.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I can only surmise that they're not saying it because of the questioning potential when they do make the arrest, when they're able to make the arrest. That's all I can think of, because if you know it's a homicide, then you know certain things. Toxicology, I don't know. That could take 2 weeks, could take 3 weeks. What else could we be waiting for? Tissue, histology, that's not going to be a factor here.
Right. And you said early on, when we first started out here some 35, 40 minutes ago, that you feel that, they probably already know what the cause of death is. All of the other reports and all the things that they're waiting on, I feel that, it could be insignificant.
If you know it's a homicide, then you probably got a pretty good idea of the cause of death. Ed, what do you think about this?
They're holding their cards close to their vest. They don't want to give away that part of the investigation, because at this point, their prime suspect, a person of interest, hasn't made a statement, and they haven't been able to interview them. So they don't want to give out that detail. That's why I think they didn't come out and say.
Right. Our subject is on the run. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't call him a person of interest. He's a subject, and he is from the beginning. Well,
he's wanted now.
Right. Of course. Yeah. There's a federal warrant. He used his girlfriend's credit card on, I think, the 30th and the 1st. Her Capital One credit card. He withdrew $1,000 from her account, knowing that she was already gone, and that makes it even like a whole different level of evil. But he was lawyered up from day one. He came home for 10 days. He shut his mouth. He went to bed every night and didn't say one word. And then after September 11th, while we were all here at the 20th year mark of the attack on our country, her family called the Suffolk County Police and reported their daughter missing because they hadn't heard from her 8 or 9 days. And, again, this is a real, excuse me, ladies, gents, this is a real scumbag. This is not a guy who is a good guy. And I don't care what his background is, what his book reading preferences are. I look at it for face value. He left the person who he claimed to love in the wilderness and went home and laid his head down and slept. I mean, anybody that could do that is a special kind of piece of shit to me.
Well, he went home with her car. He drove across country after a car stop with police that he already interacted with, and they interacted with him and her because of a domestic dispute. So all of this, and he still drove across country with that car.
Yeah, it's despicable. Mm-hmm. Kizzy Crawwell says, how do you gather a body to ensure it stays intact? Do you dig underneath that area, where a body is located, or how do you move it without disturbing?
What I always did was lay out a tarp and bring it right to the edge of the body. And I didn't really dig underneath, but we would sort of, lift a little of the soil from beneath to make sure you got everything. And then just keep edging that tarp and sliding as best you could, the body, the remains, whatever. And then after we move that, then we do a search of the area underneath.
Okay. And search underneath would be for any trace evidence or anything that was that could be not seen to the naked eye and brought into the lab to look under the microscope and whatever, right?
Yeah, any type of evidence that could be under the body.
Okay, great. Here's one that I think we all can answer. The answer would be no. Do you think the body was released already to the family? Probably not right now. They need probably more time. How does that go, Barbara? Maybe you might be able to answer it better.
It's supposed to take just the 4 to 6 hours that an autopsy takes, a couple of hours. And then you should, if you're doing a good autopsy, you should be able to release that body to the family, because you've taken all the samples you need to do microscopy, to do toxicology, blood work, blood chemistry, etc. You should be able to release it.
Okay.
I don't know the practice at this particular office because it's a different setup.
Right. So it may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and this is a very high-profile case. Maybe they want to make sure that they have everything that they need, but like you said, Barbara, once you get bodily fluids and whatever you need, wherever you're going from, what did you call it in the eyes? The
vitreous humor. Yeah.
There you go.
If you shouldn't need to say, oh, and I should also go back and get such and such a day later.
Right.
If you're doing it, you do it right.
You do it right. I'm afraid to highlight this message because it's coming in from criminal defense attorney Joe Murray, but I'm going to do it out of my worst judgment. He sends in a $5 super chat and he says, if they determined it to be a homicide but cannot get a federal indictment for any homicide charges, they are in serious trouble. Joe, I agree with that. I agree. But again, we don't know. We don't have access to the case folder. We don't know what they're working with. It's this is a guess game because we don't have access to the inner workings of this case, and only time will tell about how much evidence they have. Ed, I know you could talk on this big time, Ed.
Yeah, that doesn't stop the state from prosecution. If the feds can't get a indictment for homicide, the state surely may be able to do that.
Right. The licensed issue for Laundrie's attorney is, something that I wouldn't even want to speak on, but I would imagine if he is licensed in New York and Florida, or if he's licensed in New York, I don't think he'd be able to represent a family who's standing charged in Florida and potentially now in Wyoming. I don't know how that would work because I'm not a criminal defense attorney, but we're trying to keep this pinpointed on the autopsy. My guest is Barbara Butcher, retired chief of staff from the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, and retired NYPD Detective Ed Wallace from the Crime Scene Unit. So this is all about evidence and the autopsy explained. And Barbara, you did a great job explaining to the folks about the process. And there's no set. It's not like there's a handbook where, autopsy and said reports take 4 to 6 weeks. It varies depending on where you have to send it out to, who's doing it, what type of lab, right, Barbara? I think my memory serves me correct. The lab and the technology has a lot to do with how long it takes, right?
Sure. Some states have, like New York City has the largest forensic DNA lab in the country, so they can get their stuff done, right away. Well, almost.
Right.
But other jurisdictions may have to send it to the Texas lab, the FBI lab. Depends on their resources.
Right. All right, let's address the elephant in the room, and because everyone's asking, where did you get a name like Barbara Butcher, and how do you have the nerve to be in this business?
Are you kidding? That's the best possible name. It was the best gift my daddy ever gave me.
Great freaking answer. I love that answer. That was great.
You know, I had a colleague once named John Slaughter. So I'd go to the scene, pull out my badge and say, "Hi guys, Butcher and Slaughter."
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a good laugh at a tough job, right?
Hey, Barbara, tell them who your dad was.
Oh, my dad was Adam Butcher. He was a deputy inspector, NYPD. Yep.
I think I got a CD from him once. I lost 2 vacation days. A couple more super chats come in. A Quail says, given the length of time and elements, animals, etc., what type of homicide would be obvious as a manner of death? That would be a guess. And both of my guests would guess at this and say it could be a whole host of different things.
That's
But
a question.
yeah,
Gunshot wound, blunt force trauma to the skull or head, strangulation, broken hyoid bone. Yeah, you know,
right.
typical things that animals can't do.
Right.
You know, I was thinking about the skull fracture thing. You know, we would think that blunt force trauma to the head, most likely homicidal, but you know, a good defense attorney again could say, well, wait a minute, she was hiking on trails. What if she fell?
Well, yep.
Right. Accident.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of things snapped into my mind while this story was early in its development. I felt that they had these arguments after we found out that they had the body cam footage from August 12th. I felt like he and they were living on top of each other in basically on top of each other in this small little van. And I felt like either there was 2 scenarios that ran through in my mind is him asking her to take, because they were taking pictures. She was a YouTuber. She was all over YouTube, all social media. He asked her to come to a cliff and take a picture by the cliff, selfie, and pushed her off. That was one of my theories. The second one, which I think is more plausible, is that he waited for her to go to sleep. And while she was sound asleep, he strangled her or smothered her and wrapped her up in the the bedding that she was in, and dragged her out that 250, 300 yards and just laid her there, and then got back in the car, just like he went home and fell asleep and didn't look back and didn't think about it, just went home. And I mean, that's just my theory and it's my thoughts. Let me know down below in the comments section, because I know I'll take some heat for it, and some people will agree or disagree with me. But Ed, as you said last time when we were together, this is a complicated crime scene. This is not a ground ball textbook crime scene. You have the elements, rainwater. It just the sky just opens up and it pours there, and then you have periods of dryness. You have all of the wildlife to deal with, and you have insects and all different kinds of things that you don't see in New York, in the middle of Wyoming. So, you know, it's a tough one. Barbara, I've got you for 45 minutes. So I want to say a special thank you to you. We're going to continue, me and Ed, the conversation. I know you got an early day tomorrow to start, but we have been speaking with Barbara Butcher, the retired chief of staff from New York City Medical Examiner's Office. A wealth of information. I know that I'm not even going to ask her will she come back, because we have this blanket yes, I'll come back until you really piss me off. So I'm not going to want to piss her off. I want her to go. Any final words for the audience who are very, very much invested in this? Everyone is heartbroken over this. Gabby Petito has become America, and not only America's daughter, I think the world's daughter. I mean, this is a worldwide case. We have people from all over the world watching. Anything from these folks?
Just, you know, try to keep an open mind. I'm struggling with that. But, you know, that poor family, we just got to send our prayers to them. That's, and all the missing women and men in America. There's so many people who've gone missing, young, old, and, you know, their families suffer. So they need your prayers and your help.
Yeah. Kudos to that. I agree 1,000,000%. And as I end all of my live streams, I make a statement similar to that. But thank you so much, Barbara. Ed and I are going to continue on, and I appreciate you just taking out your time. And everybody, please leave a message down below for Barbara. We're waiting for her book to come out. But Barbara, everything that we have with Barbara, we're going to link it down below. So thank you, Barbara. There she goes. Ed, a lot of things to talk about. The federal arrest warrant, this is for the credit card use. We know, you and I both know, that's a tool to work with if and when this guy's found.
Mhm.
What's your thoughts on the search on the West Coast in Florida? These guys have their hands full, and a lot of our cops are in danger going into those really nasty places where 75% is underwater. Any thoughts on that over there? And what do you think?
I know they're still searching for him over in those areas. I don't know if he's still there. Everything right now at this point would be speculation.
Right.
But they have to go through the paces here. They have to eliminate that area there that he was last seen in and where he left his vehicle in, and try to track him down there. But I think he's gone.
Yeah, I believe so too. Barbara came back for a second because I think she cut herself off, but she came back in while you were talking. I was going to add her back in because I know she's so polite. She's probably came back to say, "Hey guys, sorry, I hit the wrong button."
Yeah, I want to say goodbye.
Yeah. So Barbara, if you're still listening, chime back in and I'll add you. But I just didn't want to cut you off in mid thought. She was in the green room. But Barbara, if you're listening, come back in. So Ed can say goodbye to you, because Ed felt like I saw him check his armpits and he did it. He said, I brushed my teeth and I put on deodorant. I don't understand it. But yeah, this is just a very twisted, convoluted case because there's so many moving parts to it. There's so much that we're not used to seeing this. I mean, this is the case of the century because, the way this guy lawyered up and the way this all unfolded, it's just got people's heads spinning like crazy. I'm texting Barbara that you want to say goodbye to her.
Okay.
How long will you be on assignment there in Washington, D.C.?
I'm done. I just finished up. I'll be flying home tomorrow.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I mean, if you can talk just a little bit about, at the scene here, I'm going to put it back on. Everyone is so, fixated on this. They want to know, was she buried in a shallow grave? And I can't really see from these pictures. I know the helicopter was above head here. It really is difficult at best to get a guess at was she put. I don't see any earth moved. I don't see any dirt. And I think that crime scene investigators, if she was buried, they would need to have some kind of equipment out there. That small pop-up tent is just so everyone can get out of the elements, right?
Well, the helicopter saw the body from the air.
They had an intact body.
Yeah, they saw an intact body lying on the ground. It didn't appear, from what the helicopter reporter was saying, that the body was buried. But maybe the body was buried. But that's a whole nother area of forensics that needs to be looked at. How was that body positioned? And how was that body out there? Did he fold the arms over her chest? Did there, or did he do something to humiliate her further in the positioning of the body? There's a whole, forensic profiling that occurs with this type of behavior. So, if he positioned them in an angelic form, that might be a sign of remorse for what he did, or if he did something far worse to embarrass her when she was found.
Right.
So, I would like to know those aspects of this as well. And only the photos will show you what that was. But I did notice that, excuse me, first they were photographing in that area of the tree, and then they went off to another area and they were photographing over there as well. So there was at least two portions of this field that they were working on.
Right. And it's going to come up in about 20 seconds, that part. So this is the tree right here in the middle of the screen, this tree, and then this more, the little bit more developed tree. There's a small tree to the right.
Mhm.
And then this little more developed right where it says found right over there. And then they branch off to this side of the screen. I don't know if everybody could see my cursor, but they move up towards where the Sunday sign is, where it says Sunday, and they go off in this direction. So, you know, maybe clothes blew off, or there was something that was laid there with her that, you know, maybe wind took it and dragged it. You see them, they're all walking over there. There's 4 guys.
Yeah.
And there's some better footage where it actually shows them walking way up here into the corner. Again, we're dealing with the wilderness, and
Right.
we're dealing with wildlife.
Right.
Crime scenes that you and I are used to are in pretty much a controlled environment, minus the rain and elements and garbage that could be, you know, flung into locations and stuff like that. But you know, we're not really dealing with anything like this unless you're somewhere up in the northern Bronx, where it's the border of Westchester County. You know,
And you know, in the several times that I did have animals that impacted the crime scene, a lot of them were household pets, and the body just lied there, dead inside an apartment or a residence, and nobody was taking care of these animals, and they took their toll on the decedent.
right. Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult at best crime scene because it's so expansive and so many different parts. That, you know, we're not privy to that information. But again, I mean, only time will tell and what they have, and I don't think that they'll be quick, as you said. I don't think they'll be quick to release what they have without a perpetrator in custody. You know, you don't want to expose your cards.
Right? No, should they? They shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's only going to make their when they finally get a hold of this guy, if they do, when they interview him, they'll have all the cards, and he won't know what they have.
Right. So someone asked about the credit card. He used it after. We're going with the 27th or any time thereafter, the 27th, the date of death, or the 28th. I would say it was probably the 27th. But only the medical examiner will be able to pinpoint that down. And that was another question I wanted to ask Barbara, but I didn't get to ask her. The use of the credit cards were after that 27th time frame. I think it was the 30th and the 1st, at least is what I saw. It's just a despicable thing for somebody to do, knowing full well that your fiance is now murdered at your own hands, and now you're going to take her credit card and go to the bank and withdraw money. And it's just a double whammy in my eyes. And I feel strongly that this guy is been running from the beginning. He did not want to face the music. There was no remorse. There was nothing. All he was trying to do was make this go away. And it's just despicable to even think of it. Because when you look at the photographs and the videos that are posted of these two, on the outside, you would look at them and say, these are loving, fun, young 22, 23-year-old couple. You know, and when you look at what he did here and what the enormity of this crime and how many people it's impacted, family-wise alone, and then now you branch out to friends and social media and all over the world. You know, this is a guy who knows what he's capable of doing. I don't know if he took his life. Nobody knows, but I know this: it's been crickets since September 1st. You know, and there's talk about him leaving the country, and you know, getting on a plane. Ed, you and I both know this. There's a flight manifest. You got to go through customs. You know, to leave the country on a jet plane. That didn't happen. If he was to leave the country, it would be through the southern border, if anything.
Well, he lives in a peninsula surrounded by the Gulf and the Atlantic Ocean. It wouldn't be too hard to get in a boat and get out of Dodge.
Yeah. Joe Murray sends this into you, Ed. Detective Wallace, the prior DV incident on August 12th that Gabby struck/scratched Brian. Is the DNA under the nails datable?
No,
in
No,
any way, perhaps
yeah.
by nail growth?
No, it's typically not. You can't put a date on it per se as to when it got underneath the nails, and that's the thing. Again, we talked with Barbara before about under the nails. So at a crime scene like that, I would assist Barbara, and we would take paper bags and bag the hands in the field of the decedent and tape the bags to the wrist. And then at the medical examiner's office, they would do the scrapings under the nails. But again, see, that's another thing too here. As you know, Ron, back in the 80s and the 80s, we were able to mediate domestic disputes.
Right.
And then try to calm things down and try not to make an arrest and leave. But then terrible things would happen in many cases where there would be a secondary assault or a more serious assault or even a homicide after that. So we changed the law in New York that stated that the NYPD no longer had discretion when it came to domestic disputes. Somebody's getting arrested.
Yeah. I mentioned it when I went over and broke down the body cam footage from Moab.
Mm-hmm.
That was exactly, you guys can go and watch my replay. I said that here in New York, that would be a cross complaint. It would be an arrest. And once you took the handcuffs out and put them on the female, she would have probably said, no, you got it all wrong. I was just defending myself. He's been hitting me all day or whatever. So that's the whole thing. I wanted to ask you about the bags because I got a lot of questions about the paper bags.
Mm-hmm.
You say we use paper bags on the decedent's hands. What's the purpose of a paper bag as opposed to a plastic bag?
The paper bag breathes. It allows air to exchange. So if there's a genetic material for DNA, you don't want to put that type of material in a sealed bag, a plastic bag that doesn't breathe, where moisture and heat can build up in there and then create fungus and mold and other items that could potentially damage the genetic material.
So it's to preserve the genetic material that's recovered or potentially on the subject.
On the subject, or in this case, under the nails and things of that nature.
Now, we saw FBI agents go into the Laundrie home in Northport with brown paper bags. Mm-hmm. Very familiar sight to both of us.
Yeah.
What could they be withdrawing with brown paper bags from the home?
Usually, again, we package any type of serological or DNA evidence in paper.
Could you explain to the audience what serological evidence is?
Well, your body fluids, so your blood, saliva, urine, vaginal fluids, seminal fluids, things of that nature.
Yeah, if somebody spit or anything like that, right?
Amylase, saliva, yes. Nasal discharge, yes. Right.
All right. So, yeah, because people were confused and asking me some of those questions. And I saw it in a lot of the chats when WFLA JB was doing his live coverage, which he does every day. And he's doing a great job of it. People were in the chat there asking questions about the brown paper bags. But we did see them take computer evidence out of that home in brown paper bags. Is there any purpose of computers going in brown bags, or it really wouldn't matter, right?
Well, actually, you shouldn't be putting hard drives or computer or electronics in any bags that can produce a static electrical charge, because the static electrical charge could damage the electronics, the hard drives, and things of that nature. So there are specially designed bags that are supposed to be used for electronics, cell phones, hard drives, computers, and things of that nature. And if they don't have those bags, then a good substitute for that would be paper or cardboard.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it looked like, and you couldn't see what was in the bags, but it did look like it was, a couple of them looked like there were towers, the hard drive towers, or just computer tower. I'm going to look back to Huda's super chat. Joey Brooklyn, my director of security, told me to look back. I'm going back. I may not be able to get it. Hold on, Huda. Where did it go? New member. Give me 2 seconds. Technology. You know, I'm a one-man show here, so sometimes I miss stuff. There's Joe Murray. Probably not, Joey. Darn it. the furthest back I can go is to D Florida Mama with the $2 super sticker. Thank you for that. Thank you, Miss Sofel, for becoming a member. Huda, just put it again in the chat and I'll take a look at it. Huda Ali, put the message again in the chat and I'll grab it.
I think she was talking about some kind of red paint on a tree.
Okay.
Whether or not it was ballistics.
Right. All right. I'm going to wait for confirmation of that, but that is a question that I had on my list to ask you. All right. Some of the trees at this location here, let me put it back up on the screen. So some of the trees in and around the Teton National Park had like red spray paint on them. And it was asked and questioned by some other folks in the chat, not here, but in other chats. Would evidence collection teams mark that if it was ballistics? And I know the answer to it, but I'm going to let you answer that. Red paint on trees, what would be the purpose for that?
Well, I wouldn't do that. And I don't know any protocols or standards in forensics that would have you mark a tree with red paint if it had ballistic evidence. We have markers, evidence markers that we would use. I would think that if a tree was marked in that way, it might be something done by the forest rangers or the forestry people.
Right.
Maybe there is some significance to the red marking on a tree in terms of hiking and trails. Or maybe there's some significance for it in the day-to-day care of the tree. I'm not sure what it is.
Right. I asked some of my good friends over at EquiSearch. I asked Twyla Cisco, who's the search coordinator on missing person cases, and she says that they do that when they are searching areas and let them know that they cleared a particular area. A lot of times they use like a ribbon or like a a little like flag, kind of sort of like
right. Like on structures, we would paint a red X. Like when we're searching structures like we did at the World Trade Center and so forth. But I'm not aware of it in the field like that. You would paint a marking on the tree to potentially say, okay, this area was cleared.
Right. And I think Huda was asking about rocks as well, painted with red paint, and there was a couple of rocks sprayed with spray paint. Could that have been a weapon? If it was a weapon, it wouldn't have been left there. In other words, if he used it, and I know where they're going with this, if he used it or the perpetrator used it to hit Gabby and kill her, that wouldn't be painted red because you'd be tainting evidence by spray painting it. They would want to leave that in its natural state and then bag it up in the brown paper bag and send it to the lab. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that would be correct.
Yeah. So there's the answer to that question. Who's up? Big Dog. Okay. I'm just going to look over the chat just a little bit more. Again, like I said, Ed has seen countless amounts of crime scenes. I have the numbers here. They're staggering, the amount of crime scenes that he's been on and has investigated. 2,656 crime scenes, including the 1993 and 2001 World Trade Center attacks and bombing. He's testified at 398 trials. He's holds a certification in teaching hazmat and weapons of mass destruction. He's just a world of information and knowledge in this investigation field. And we're going to stick close with Ed and Barbara and lots of the other folks that we have that can give us a little bit of insight of how things are going as they unfold, because this is, as any case, and Ed could tell you this, it could change day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. I mean, these investigations are fluid. So DTC prime time, how difficult is it to determine time of death when exposed to those elements? Barbara spoke to this, but I mean, if you want to take it, I mean, I know that you could speak on this a little bit.
Well, yeah. So it can be difficult depending on the condition of the body. the bottom line is we don't know what the exact condition of the body is, okay? And how badly, if it was decomped, if it was mummified, if there was any, I don't think there would be any adiposia, which is grave wax, because she wasn't really in a moist environment. We don't know the impact of the indigenous wildlife and insects, so forth and so on. But all these things factor in, and it can be very difficult. Absolutely can be very difficult. And it's not an exact science. There's things that we can do. We know from studies, as I said, from the body farm, at what intervals certain insects arrive at a dead body, especially bodies that were laying on top of such a surface. In fact, that's what we do at the body farm. We position bodies that were donated to science in this 1 acre of land on the hill behind the University of Tennessee Hospital, and we bury some, we leave some out, we put, and we put some in drainage tunnels or drainage sewers, and we put some out in trees, and then we study them and capture, when these insects come and what they do to the body, when these rodents come and animals come and what they do to the body and how they change the appearance of the body, how they start to destruct portions of the body and move body parts away from the original body and so forth. So right. All of these things impact this. It's very difficult to say.
Yeah, that's fascinating information to know that that you're constantly doing these kinds of tests to see, or these putting together a scenario like that so you can actually see how it goes, and I think that's fascinating. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Joe Murray, thank you, Joe Murray is sending in a ton of super chats. He's going to be broke before the end of the night. Thank you, Detective Ed Wallace. Would the FBI try to limit the times that they return to the vehicle to search again to avoid criticism at trial?
Well, you don't limit the times to return to a vehicle for criticism purposes. You try to do as thorough a job as you can when you have the vehicle in your possession. But if new information arises that comes out of the autopsy, or if new details come out from a witness, then you may have to revisit this vehicle and look for additional information that may have just been to corroborate what a witness told you, or maybe you got new information from a traffic cam or whatever the case may be, and now you're going to look for additional evidence that you didn't think maybe was important before, and it may now be important because of these new developments.
Yeah. Thank you, Counsel Joe Murray, for that question. I appreciate that. And thank you for the super chat. Hey, I want to say, just say hello to the chat a little bit, because it's been such a busy night with Barbara and yourself. Emerald Kimmy, thank you for being here. Let me just say hello to a couple people, and I want to thank my moderators, the channel members, the Patreon supporters, and everyone who subscribes to this community. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, so you'll get all things DutyRon when I go live or upload another video. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all one word, DutyRon, and I will link all of Ed's stuff, his LinkedIn page, and some of the various different things that he is got going on his social media. So if you ever need to get in contact with him, you can get in contact with him through there. Just limit the questions to him, because he does have a busy schedule. He is doing a lot of stuff professionally, so his day is pretty busy, if you will. So if you can, send in the questions that you want to send in to Ed on DutyRon.com, and I'll be glad to just touch base with him and answer any questions for you. Let me know where you're watching. If you are new, first time here, say hello in the chat and just tell me that you're new. So this way I can say hello to you and welcome you to this community. I hope each and every one of you have enjoyed this informative, interactive live stream. I know I certainly have, because I learn things from folks like Ed and Barbara on a regular basis. So again, let me know where you're watching, your city, state, or country. And if you're new, let me know. Hello from Pottsville. Good to see you. Hello, Mercedes. Thank you for joining. Good to see you. Hello from Tennessee. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Wow, look at all these different locations. Hello from Oregon. Good to see you. Thank you. Wow, a lot of people. I just want to say too, for the folks who have left questions in the chat and they didn't get answered, forgive us. It's hard to entertain every question. If we did that, we'd have a whole live stream of just answering questions. So that's why I took it in segments. And Ed has been kind enough to sit here for extra time. Again, I gotta approve his overtime slip. My budget is just going bonkers right now.
I'll take it in time.
Oh, he's going to take it in time. That's a good one. All right, listen, you could stay another hour for time, no problem.
I'm fine.
The bosses would say, yeah, if you're going to take it in time, you could stay another 5 hours if you want.
There you go. Whatever you need.
Yeah. So Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. Hi, Kathy. Hello, Elle. Good to see you. Hello from England, Queensland, Australia. Carol Johns. Thank you. Put another prawn on the Barbie. San Diego, California. Hello, Summer Normal. New from Ohio. Welcome. Hi from Brazil. Thank you for joining. People from all over the world here. Hello.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
I did see a question that I would like to answer if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
It was a question about does the designation, I believe it was worded something to the effect of, can you talk about the designation of homicide and why some homicides would not necessarily be a crime? And the medical legal definition for homicide is death at the hands of another. And in terms of why it wouldn't be a crime, certain homicides are justified, such as self-defense. So that wouldn't be a crime. It wouldn't be murder. It would be a justifiable homicide.
You know, and some people aren't aware of that, and some people think that it's right away. Homicide's a homicide, but
homicide doesn't mean murder. Okay, those are two different things. One is a medical legal definition. One is a legal definition.
Wow. Yeah, so there you go. That was a great question, and it slipped by me. And thank God that Ed is a good investigator, and he is monitoring the chat. Maybe I'm going to have him come on and monitor the chat for me every once in a while, because I miss that stuff. That was a good one. That's a good question. A lot of people ask it. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. This is an ongoing case. We have to be patient with the authorities, and we want Brian Laundrie brought to justice. This guy, as I said, is a scumbag. He is a real piece of work. And you know what? Evil walks amongst us. It doesn't. They don't have a face. They don't have a particular look. They don't have a particular way they act. But it's just a testament to how it is important to be aware of your surroundings and be aware when something's not right. And because folks have seen something and said something, the YouTube channel Red, White, and Bethune, they were instrumental in the recovery of Gabby Petito. And I mean, they are, in my mind, heroes. And I know the wife and husband, they don't want credit like that, but they really did a fantastic job of seeing something and saying something. So kudos to them. Ed, thank you again for doing this two times in 1 week. It's great to have somebody like you on board, because it really does help put things into perspective, and it gives a great insight into the great work that our forensics teams across the country are doing, and you're out there teaching it. So I think it's just wonderful that you take out the time to come on here with us. We had at one point 10,000 people watching this live stream, and I think it did a lot of good for a lot of people. So
happy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. And as I like to end all of these live streams, I like to say, God bless the world, God bless the United States of America, and God bless each and every one of us here in the chat, and all victims of crime and their families across the globe, but especially Gabby Petito and her family. We say a special prayer and give strength and positive vibes to them in this very, very difficult time. So thank you for everyone joining. and I appreciate you subscribing and becoming a member of this channel. Ed, thank you again, and good night from New York and Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, guys.